Welcome back. Another week of football, another week of money-making football here. The combination continues, Walterfootball.com with Odd Shoppers. So we appreciate you being back with us. We can't do this with Walter Football without the Walter from the site. So we appreciate you hanging with us as well. We got 5 picks to jump in. If you haven't already, hit the thumbs up button here on the Odd Shopper channel. Subscribe. We will tell you all in depth about what you can get, and it's amazing the opportunities of information and direction from betting to DFS on walterfootball.com. So we will tell you all about that. But my friend, we are back. It's a pleasure to see you. Why don't we just dive right into it, where your radar is picking up first and foremost?
Yeah, the first game I'm getting to is Houston +3 against Washington, and you had a great call calling out the Washington money line last week against the Eagles. But I think this week Washington takes a loss here against Houston. They're coming off their Super Bowl. I mean, if you watch their locker room like after the game, it was like they won the Lombardi Trophy. Like I was like, where is the Lombardi Trophy? Just looking at their celebration, like how do they bounce back from that 6 days later? Like I just don't think they're going to have the energy. And you know, it kind of like correlates to this trend. I'm not like a huge trend guy, but like if you can explain it logically, I think you can use it. So teams coming off wins as double-digit underdogs are 54 and 81 against the spread, dating back since 1989. That's as far back as my data goes. So it's like 40% cover rate. So you might be wondering like, oh, how can you take Houston? They just lost to the Giants. They actually outgained the Giants both in total yardage and yards per play. The only reason they didn't cover is because they turned the ball over twice in the red zone. It was frustrating. You know, I had the Texans last week, but I think they bounced back and they're a lot better at home. Think about some of their wins at home recently. Like last year, they beat the Patriots at home, or it was a 3-point game against the Patriots at home. They beat the Chargers at home. They tied the Colts in week 1 at home this year. They played the Eagles very tough. Back a couple of Thursday nights ago. So I think Houston covers the spread or maybe wins outright. Getting the +3 is pretty key. So I think definitely the upsets in play here.
Yeah, you read my mind because I was just going to quickly follow up and say, contest aside, as we're looking at the Westgate, we're looking at the odds for the contest. If this is just a Walter play, it sounds like you would sprinkle a little on the money line too.
Yeah, for sure. Always like to do that. If I'm betting heavily on an underdog, I usually go like a quarter of what I'm betting overall on the money line. So definitely going to be on the money line for Houston as well.
All right, let's tell the world about the benefits of what they can get just by showing up at walterfootball.com. You guys have mock drafts that are updating, it seems, by the day. You're looking at any odds, any line movement, sides, totals. There's DFS content in between. So from next year's draft right through this week's plays, you have everybody covered at walterfootball.com.
Yeah, everything to do with the NFL. You mentioned the mock drafts. We have updated mock drafts every single week. And as we get closer to the draft, it's going to be every single day as we get new information coming in. And yeah, if a line moves for the picks, we talk about it. Also injuries is like when the injury reports coming out on Friday, I posted a big update on Saturday and then Sunday morning as well. Also talk about where to get the best lines too. So yeah, everything's at walterfootball.com. Like you said, fantasy stuff. We grade every trade, grade every signing. So you can find it all there.
Walterfootball.com. Again, we can't say the website enough. All right, we're going to stay in the NFC East here and roll with this Giants game hosting the Lions. Curious to see what side you're on here.
Yeah, we're fading another NFC East team. So I just talked about how the Giants were outgained in total yardage and yards per play last week. I think people underestimate how like not terrible the Lions are. I almost wanted to say good, but they're not a good team at all. Like, but they're not the worst team in the NFL. Whereas like people thought they might have been a couple weeks ago, and they've rattled off a couple wins in a row. If you look at the common opponents between these two teams, and like their records are far different. But you know, against the Cowboys, for example, the Giants hosted the Cowboys. They got blown out when Cooper Rush was playing quarterback. Detroit went into Dallas with Dak Prescott at quarterback, and if Jamal Williams doesn't fumble at the 1-yard line, they take a 13-10 lead in the fourth quarter, and it was still a 10-6 game with 3 minutes left in that game. Another common opponent, Seattle. Detroit played Seattle without Amon-Ra St. Brown and DeAndre Swift, and that was a 3-point game, whereas the Giants went into Seattle and got blown out. The Lions have had such a tough schedule this year. Like they played the Eagles, the Vikings, the Seahawks, the Patriots, the Cowboys, the Dolphins. Whereas the Giants, they played against like the Panthers, the Jaguars, the Texans. I think if you reverse these two schedules, I think the Lions might have a winning record, as crazy as it sounds, and the Giants might have a losing record. The Lions aren't as bad against the run as people think. It seems like every running back they go against, it seems like everyone thinks that running back's going to do great. Like, remember a couple weeks ago, everyone was on Aaron Jones. He did nothing. Raheem Mostert the week before, he did nothing. Last week, the Bears, Justin Fields, obviously, but the Bears running backs did nothing. So I don't think Saquon Barkley's going to have a huge game. And the Giants, I think, could be looking ahead to the Thanksgiving game against Dallas. So, I like the Giants here +3. And again, going to bet the money line too.
Yeah, it's a good point you raise about stopping running back Saquon Barkley there as well. So Giants, we fade them, another team in the NFC East. All right, let's move to our third play here, which is in New Orleans. And you've got two teams. I'm curious to see because it looks like it's going to be the battle of which team screws up first here.
Yeah, these teams have been pretty brutal this year, but everyone remembers the Rams' ugly losses, but all of them have been against elite teams, like the Buffalo game to open the season. They got blown out twice by San Francisco. They got blown out by Dallas. Like, those are all elite teams, but against non-elite teams, when Matthew Stafford has played, like, they were up 28-3 against Atlanta in week 2. The game got close, but they took their foot off the gas. They beat Arizona by 8 the first time. They beat Carolina by 14. They were winning against Tampa the whole game until that last drive where Tom Brady won at the end. So against non-elite competition, when Matthew Stafford's a quarterback, they've done like okay. So I don't think they're necessarily going to lose to New Orleans. Whereas the Saints, if you look at their injury report right now, it's like half their roster is on the injury report. So they're missing 3 offensive linemen. They're missing their top cornerback. They're missing their top receiver. They're missing a safety. They're missing one of their top linebackers. This team is just ravaged by injury. And I know Cooper Kupp's out, but against a bad Saints defense, I think Sean McVay should be able to string together enough offense to at least cover the spread. And one other thing, this is basically a super contest play because the line at the super contest is +4.5. And this line has dropped to 3.5. And I think if once Stafford is declared ready to go from his concussion, I think it'll go to 3. So I think playing the line value here makes sense in the super contest.
All right. So that's the difference here, is jumping in ahead of time, because we don't have a lot of examples of this. This might be one of the few that we've talked about, jumping ahead of value because of things locking for the super contest.
Yeah, you see that sometimes. Like week 3, the Jaguars played against the Chargers, and the line for that was 7. And then on Friday of that week, it was announced that Justin Herbert may not play. He eventually did play, but the line fell to 3.5. So unless you submitted the contest for the Thursday game, right, you were able to get the +7. So it's usually you kind of want to find these values, and I think this is an example of that.
All right, we move to Minnesota here, and you talk about two teams coming off opposite ends of the spectrum. Dallas in town. This is a tight one, Walt, where you're only looking at a 1.5 line for the Vikings at home.
Yeah, I think people are surprised that the Vikings are home underdogs here against Dallas, but I'm kind of not. I feel like the Vikings are so overrated right now, and Minnesota fans hate me. Like, they want my head on a spike. Like it's so brutal. I get so many hate mails from Viking fans. But really, I mean, they've been so lucky this year. Like in week 3 against the Lions, they were down 10, and then they only came back because Amon-Ra St. Brown and DeAndre Swift got hurt. Against the Dolphins, when the Dolphins had their third-string quarterback, they were outgained by 224 yards. Against Washington, they were down 7 until Heineke threw that ugly interception, and then the Vikings scored the tying touchdown. Against the Saints, when the Saints were missing their entire receiving core and Alvin Kamara, they needed a last-second missed field goal to win. And against Chicago, they needed a last-second touchdown drive to win. If you adjust for schedule, the Vikings are 24th in net yards per play. This is not an 8-1 team. This is like a 5-4 team wearing an 8-1 costume. It's just I don't really see this team being that good. Whereas Dallas, I think they can really take advantage of Minnesota's liabilities, which is the pass protection, especially if Christian Darrisaw is out there, Minnesota's left tackle. So I'm gonna ask you this, what you think this number is if you haven't seen it. So quarterbacks under pressure this year. Matt Ryan was benched when he was completing 51% of his passes under pressure. Carson Wentz, again, 47%. Jared Goff, who's known to be terrible under pressure because he's completing 45%. What do you think Kirk Cousins' percentage is while he's under pressure this year?
I'm going to guess, because you're leading with other guys who are struggling, that he is like bottom third tier, and it's probably an ugly number.
He is at the bottom. He's 42%, 42% completion. And so if his left tackle's out against Micah Parsons, that's just so brutal. Also, the Vikings are coming off that grueling overtime game. I know Dallas is as well, but Minnesota played far more snaps. They played 75 snaps defensively. So this team's going to be so tired. I think Dallas just has all the advantages here.
You know, I jumped right away. I jumped on Minnesota on the money line as soon as this thing opened up, because I thought Dallas, this was a circle game where Mike McCarthy win one for the Gipper, and it was a letdown opportunity. But I immediately started to look at some stuff that you see and you know, much deeper analysis here. That's why we do this with you. But I immediately cashed out, and I just laid the 1.5 with Dallas. So I feel good about that now with this. All right, take us home. It's not often that we get excited to end things in Pittsburgh. But look, there's some good food, some good booze, some good times out there. This is going to be interesting. It's an old AFC North battle here. Mike Tomlin versus the Cincinnati Bengals, who are favored on the road.
Yeah, so Pittsburgh was my top pick last week. I made them my pick of the month. So I love Pittsburgh once again against Cincinnati. They're just a different team with TJ Watt. You know, in 2 games with Watt this year, they held Joe Burrow. They forced him into 5 turnovers, and then they held the Saints to 10 points, and really 3 points if you take away that garbage a touchdown before halftime. Pittsburgh's defense is in the top 6 of pass defense when Watt's on the field. And when he's not on the field, they were 30th this year. It's just such a big difference with him. And you need that pass defense against Joe Burrow. You know, he's not going to have Jamar Chase once again. And we saw Joe Burrow really struggle without Jamar Chase in the one game against Cleveland. I know they bounced back against Carolina, but that Panthers team was so demoralized from that DJ Moore celebration when there was they were penalized and the extra point was missed. I feel like Carolina was just like not into that game, and we saw them bounce back. So I think Cincinnati is going to be in trouble here. They have a lot of other injuries too. Like they were down 3 of their top 4 cornerbacks before their bye. Like maybe some of them come back, but their number 1 corner is going to be out. They were down 2 of their top defensive tackles as well. And I saw La'el Collins wasn't practicing either. So this is a Cincinnati team that has a ton of injuries against a Steelers team getting healthier. So I think it makes sense to take Pittsburgh. Also, this line seems like illogical to me because Cincinnati was -3 at Cleveland, and now they're -4 in Pittsburgh. Like, so you're saying that Pittsburgh is 1 point worse than Cleveland with TJ Watt back. I'm not buying that. I think Pittsburgh's better than Cleveland with Watt on the field. So I loved getting the +4. Once again, I'm going to bet the money line too.
Love it. Back-to-back hammers this week, last week with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Good way to end. All right, let's do this, Walt. Let's recap real quick the 5 picks that you just gave everybody. And I know there's a game or maybe 2 that just have to stay on the cutting floor and don't make the final cut. So any honorable mention or mentions that you have?
Sure. The 5 I picked were Houston +3, Detroit +3, LA Rams +4.5, Dallas -1.5, and then Pittsburgh +4. As for honorable mentions, I was looking at the Eagles -7, bouncing back off that Monday night loss. The advanced spread on this game was -10.5, so it's fallen 3.5 points just for that one result. I feel like the Eagles, that was more of an effort thing more than anything. They're better than Washington. They just didn't show up, and they got unlucky with some of those bad officiating calls as well. Plus the Quez Watkins fumble that he could have scored, or at least they would have been scoring position. So I think the Eagles bouncing back makes sense. And I mentioned Matt Ryan struggling against pressure. He's going to see a lot of pressure against the Eagles. Another game I like is Chicago +3. I feel like such a square here liking Chicago. Like 80% of the money is on Chicago. Everyone's on the Bears. But really, like, how can Atlanta win by 4 or more? I just, like, Chicago's defense is so bad. That's what scares me here, plus the public action. But, like, in real games this year, I'm not counting that San Francisco game where the 49ers are down, like, their whole roster. In real games this year, Atlanta has won by 4 or more only once, and that was by 4 in Seattle. So I really don't see them winning by more than 3 here. So I like Chicago, but not as much as the other games.
Awesome. Walterfootball.com is the website. From updated mock drafts routinely, especially as we get closer to the offseason, to DFS angles, to betting odds, everything that moves. You want to make sure that you get the information first and foremost at walterfootball.com. That you can come hang with us on the Odd Shopper channel and find the best value for the bet that you place. Always a pleasure, my friend. We'll do it again next week.
Sounds good. Talk to you next week.
All right, everybody. We'll see you then.